talk about trends in settling hospitality cases. Kendall, you deserve my full undivided. Sorry. Anyway, you met Kendall yesterday. She's joining us again today because the two topics we talked about, we just couldn't do without them both. So we're glad to have her back with us. And remember, she's a litigator, Cozen Connor, for over 20 years, focuses on hospitality and transportation law. She's going to do this presentation in Spanish. Oh, no, that's another one we're doing. Yeah. But anyway, we're happy to have her back. Please welcome Kendall back to the podium.
Well, good morning. Nice to see everybody again. As I told you yesterday, I like to give away things when I speak because I'd like you to participate. And in my excitement, I forgot that one of my giveaways yesterday is a book called Cowboy Ethics. Has anybody read that? Okay, well, you remember I talked about the Wild Wild West and how Texas is a little different. This is one of my stepfather's favorite books. And because some of what I'm going to talk about today in settling cases has to do with being ethical, you now have a second bite at this apple. It's especially great if you're getting on a plane because it's plane friendly. The other thing I will be giving away today is wine. So if you're getting on a plane, you will have to check it, you'll have to chug it, or you'll have to leave it here. And the clicker, oh here, sorry. So the way that I approached this, yesterday I also told you that I would rather you all hear from other people besides me, which is why I like participation. So what I did to set up this presentation is I interviewed various people in the hospitality industry, claims managers, attorneys, both in-house and out-house. And I also talked with my colleagues at my firm, and I spoke with several different mediators that I like and respect. Some of them allowed me to actually use their name in the presentation, and some of them did not. So when I was interviewing everyone, it was really my question, what are you seeing as going on with, trends in settling cases or not settling? And I got so much feedback that frankly was a little, little negative and kind of dark, that instead of calling this trends, I'm going to call it the sins in settling hospitality cases, which is why I'm giving away the 7 deadly sins. So please participate if you would like wine or if you would just like to give it to your colleague. I'm going to talk about the 7 deadly sins in settling or not settling hospitality cases kind of in the last 2 years. We're also going to talk about the impact of those 7 sins and the games that I see ensue and that other people that I interviewed see ensue. And finally, we're going to talk about best practices to avoid shames in the game of trying to settle cases. So what are the 7 deadly sins? Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and I'm so sad to say sloth because sloths have really made a comeback. And when I think of a sloth, I think of a happy little furry guy. And actually, if you go to the Dallas Aquarium, they actually have a real sloth there. He's super cute. But unfortunately, in this situation, it is a negative connotation. And why don't we just kind of jump into anybody discussing if they feel like participating, what we think of when we think of pride. Anybody? It doesn't have to necessarily be in the settlement context. Well, I can tell you that the first feedback I got when I asked my client, why are cases not settling? And her response was, because people are stupid, which I thought was hilarious. So I think that that can also be interpreted as people are proud and people don't necessarily, including lawyers, including outhouse counsel, some of us are not realistic about what the case is worth. And so when I say pride, I'm talking about even myself. I asked Christine Johnson, I said, what are you seeing like in joint sessions? Does anybody even do joint sessions? Because I can tell you at mediation, I have done 1 joint session in the last 2 years. And to be honest with you, it crashed and burned because I was so excited to kind of show off for my client. And at the end of the presentation, my client was very happy and I really irritated the plaintiffs. And so that was my fault. I was too prideful because I thought I had a great case, and I did have a great case. However, I should have just not done that because it got mediation off on the wrong foot. And all they focused on, these plaintiffs, was whether they could have a copy of my PowerPoint because they were so offended by it. Guests are highly unreasonable and they seem quite well informed and proud that they know the right things to say and ask. That's from a claims director at an international hotel. Jeff Abrams, he's a Houston mediator. He actually was told by an insurance adjuster at mediation that you Texans are the only ones who are still doing opening sessions. So show of hands, does anybody like to do an opening session anymore at mediation? Yeah, I don't, oh, there's somebody in the back. Okay, so are you able to take wine with you today? Okay, so Taylor, will you grab him a bottle of Zen? And why do you, what is your name, by the way? Oh, Jason, the third Jason Bloom that I know in my legal career. Why do you like opening sessions?
Sessions are often an opportunity for for the attorneys to kind of show off for their clients. I take a different approach. What I do in my opening sessions is I take what is my only opportunity to speak directly to the plaintiff as a defense attorney. And what I try to do is create a personal connection with the plaintiff. And really what I do is I empathize with the plaintiff and I tell him him or her, you know, I understand what you're going through, and really try to give them in their mind, you know, I can be your friend or I can be your foe. I'm your friend right now, and this is that opportunity. Because without that session, I never get to speak directly to that person. So I don't use it. I have in the past used it to make my case. I don't do that anymore.
And I'm going to actually thank you very much for that. It's a great point. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about later is it is better to be friendly. And I think some of us, myself included, get heated. And unfortunately, when I was talking about ethics yesterday, somebody approached me afterwards and said, actually it was David Denny. He said, I really need to have somebody read my emails before I send them. And that's a great practice, because I got so irritated with those lawyers that filed all these sanctions that I literally dropped an F-bomb on the phone, and it was very unprofessional and I was heated. And so I am trying very hard to do what I do best, which is be friendly. That's my personality. And so I think that's a wonderful point, that maybe the opening session could be used in a friendlier setting than the way that I did it. And Jake, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was basically going to say the same thing that you did. One of the things I always say is it's never about the case. It's the line. We are here to settle the case. We are not here to argue about it because that's not going to make anybody happy. And I tell them to listen to their lawyer and the mediator because it doesn't matter what I say. I mean, we often forget that people hate us. They hate lawyers. That they don't want to say it, but they do. And if it comes out of my mouth, they're not going to want to listen to it. But if I introduce myself, say I'm sorry, we met under these circumstances, let them know that I have kids, that type of thing, and go from there. But don't ever talk about the case in an opening session.
Except for you have a great accent, and I would like to listen to you talk. I would say that if
The third person that said that this morning, you missed your call. You should be on like ABC radio.
Well, it can get, everybody sounds like this from.
I know. And by the way, if you don't want a bottle of wine, I do have Starbucks cards left from yesterday if you're getting on a plane and you don't want to take it. So feel free to come to me and exchange later if you would like.
Your discretion. I think we've got somebody else. Hold on one second.
I was going to give you my 2 cents. Depending on who your opposing counsel is, you might know them pretty well, or you might not know them pretty well. Because of pride, they may not have given their own client an adequate assessment of the case. And so you might in that opening session be the first time that other party hears a kernel of truth about what their case is about. So as politely as possible, you might trigger a situation where when you separate, the other party saying to their lawyer, what did she mean by that? What are you talking about? We got to worry about this now. Like, I find it's a good way to, clients always drink the Kool-Aid about their own position on case, and they get so blinded by it that they don't see the forest for the trees. And so I find it's a good opportunity, if you can keep the emotions down, to let people hear the other side of the coin for what may be the first time, depending on who their lawyer is.
And to be honest with you, Elizabeth, that is exactly why I did it, because I did not, and I do not believe that these lawyers representing these plaintiffs have ever told them why their case is so weak. And so that is why I did it. But again, I maybe could have done it in a softer format. I did tell them that we were there to settle. However, I'm just bringing this up because sometimes that is the reason people want to hear themselves talk. As my mother once told me, Kendall, just because the air is silent does not mean it needs to be filled with the sound of your voice.
Kendall, real quick, I just want to, a couple of things. The empathy concept is crucial. And in my experience, I've been a mediator, and I've, as an expert, and sometimes I get asked to sit in on these things. the pride gets in the way a lot. And in my perspective, it's because the lawyer is solely focused on winning rather than a resolution, because their pride is and their ego is so ingrained in the win or lose. And we've got to get away. In my opinion, we need to get away from that. But it's, from my perspective, it's a lack of emotional intelligence from lawyers. And we're all lawyers lawyers are the only profession, Kerry, that go to school for 3 years to learn how to get their way. Right? Yeah, it's exactly. It's the same thing, but it's all about, we're all control freaks when we get out of law school, right? It's a question of, are we going to learn how to compromise and have empathy for others? Some do, some don't, but it's a fascinating topic. I'm glad you're talking about it. Please continue.
Well, and that's a really good point, Stephen, that my presentation really is about the emotional ability to communicate as a lawyer. That's really what this presentation is. And I mean, my husband, as I will tell you in a few slides, he's in commercial real estate, and he gave me he is the best negotiator that I know. And he said to me, people like to do deals with people they like. And so, and he's right. And so it does not behoove me to get irritated with the other side or drop an F-bomb. A, that's not very classy. And B, now he doesn't like me. And so this is also a good lesson for me. Sin number 2, greed. So I ask, what effect, I know everybody's tired of talking about the effect of the pandemic, but I thought it was interesting that one of the mediators that I like a lot said, we thought it would make people more conservative, and it may have in the beginning. One other mediator told me this, but it certainly doesn't now. One of my claims adjusters said hotels actually kind of seem scared of the guest, maybe because of the business that they lost during the pandemic. So they're kind of going over the top, and it doesn't work. The thing that I've seen, and I say this with love in my heart because I love the hospitality industry, it is my favorite type of law to practice. The thing that I see that my clients do that is also, in my opinion, greedy, and I know that there's a reason, they've explained this to me why they do this, is when somebody has an incident at a hotel or a restaurant, it is so easy to fix the situation immediately with a little bit of customer service. And I could give you a zillion examples of good and bad situations, but what I see my own clients not doing is not doing that little piece of customer service that would make the person maybe not file a claim. And so that's just something that I see it on unfortunately on our side as well, not just on the claimant side. Sin number 3, lust. So interesting. Everybody's somebody else when they check into a hotel. I really appreciated Rick Barrett's presentation yesterday. I did not know that you were going to talk about sins. I did not mean to steal your theme. But to be honest with you, some of the stuff I was reading when I was doing this, it's kind of hard to read. It's kind of hard to listen to. One of my clients said, I've handled a lot of SPA cases with sexual assault claims, and they're actually worse now because of the Me Too era, and because of also just, this effect that COVID has had. So this is kind of another theme that I'm seeing, and that mediators and clients are also seeing. Envy. I'm a lot of things, okay? There's a lot of labels you can place on me. Jealousy is not something that I have. I'm not a jealous person. So I sometimes don't understand this concept, and I certainly didn't know that I was going to read about envious employees at hospitality establishments can actually negatively affect the customer and the guest experience. And the reason for that is because there's a bunch of research done on this, that envious employees are not willing to go above and beyond. So somebody needs a cup of coffee and the coffee bar isn't open yet. The person who's jealous of their co-employee is not going to be the one to say, oh, let me do that for you, or is not going to be the one to say, let me cover that shift for you. And so why do we care about that? Well, I can tell you that in a case that I recently handled, the front of the house employees were short-staffed. The loss prevention department was short-staffed on the day of this incident. And guess what? That was one of the biggest complaints. I don't know why they were short-staffed. Maybe it's because somebody didn't want to cover for somebody else. So envy is not necessarily a sin of an attorney, but it could be something that is happening inside the establishment that somehow affects the case and maybe the ability to settle. Gluttony. Again, these are all direct quotes from my clients, that people are racking up charges from spa treatments and lavish dinners and alcohol, and then they come up with some reason why the hotel should refund them or why they don't have to pay for it. Also, because rates have dropped in various establishments, there's a different type of clientele coming in and a different level of demandingness. Sin number 6, wrath. This is kind of what I talked about yesterday, and I did not ask for this quote. I just thought it was so interesting. Ever since the pandemic, people have been uncivil. That's literally my client's email to me when I ask him, what are the things you're seeing? There are increased threats of social media backlash for perceived wrong. Again, you're seeing this sort of like people are angry, and people are, whether it's wearing a mask or, I mean, people are just angry. Scorched earth policy and discovery. I cannot tell you how, I recently had a case where I'm not lying, over 1,000 requests for production. We had over 1 million documents in that case, and it was absolutely ridiculous. And it was a scorched earth policy to try to, submit us into settling. One of my partners who represents an international hotel said there are guests that are refusing to leave because they had COVID relief, the ability to stay in the hotel as a tenant, and they're lodging threats to the hotel. So I thought that was interesting. Also a little bit scary. And finally, our sloth. I asked Christine, I said, what do you see when you're settling a case in a mediation that sometimes people overlook, or what's something that sometimes people aren't really diligent about? Confidentiality. I can tell you, I personally have been wronged by this because I did not bring it up soon enough. And then when I decided to bring it up, it was too late and they wouldn't agree on it. So sometimes settlements can slow down because you don't ask for what you really want at the beginning. Christine made a great point. She's like, when I walk into the mediation, I have a list of things that have to be material terms in my settlement, and then we talk about it right up front. Now, we talked about some of this stuff is hard to read. The other quote that I share with you is just gross. Because of her client's willingness to have a tenant stay there during COVID, the tenant now will not leave, and there is a hoarding problem. And there are roaches coming out of the room, which is just disgusting. And because she continues to pay her rent, they cannot evict her. And so these are just things that are happening. When I ask for people to tell me what's going on in your settlement world, in your hospitality world, these are the things that people share with me. So the impact of the 7 sins and the games that ensue. So let's just be honest. I mean, half of mediation to me is a game. I mean, these people come in with these $40 million demands to a single defendant, and it's ridiculous. So we're going to talk about how sometimes we can't make a deal. The price is not right, operation, the domino effect, Hollywood Squares, and Bachelor Nation. We have to talk about it, and 2 truths and a lie. So let's not make a deal. My client says to me, I feel like plaintiffs' attorneys are being way more unreasonable. Totally agree. Every mediation hits a wall and more cases are actually going to trial. 2 mediations. Raise your hand if you feel like you have to have 2 mediations now to settle a case. Okay, so I mean, I thought more people would raise their hand, but I will tell you that this is very common, especially in a case where the damages are very high. I mean, not in a slip and fall case, not in a case that's maybe, $200,000, but the really, really large cases, sometimes they're taking 2 mediations to settle. And I asked them, this mediator, I said, why is that? And he said, I think it's because some, for example, carriers like to get their toes wet. They want to walk in, see what the case is worth, see what we're going to value it at. And he said, the other thing I'm seeing is a lot of people do these early mediations. By the way, my clients included, they want to mediate immediately before really any discovery is done. And so therefore, you get to some point in mediation, but you haven't done any discovery on kind of the meat of the case. So then you have to come back and do a second mediation. So this is a little bit of a game. I also think it's a game that plaintiffs' lawyers like. I know that they really want to settle the case, but let's just drag it out and have 2 mediations. Outrageous demands by plaintiffs that do not lead to meaningful dispositions of cases. It is unhelpful to get a $10 million demand and settle the case for $300,000. Happens all the time in my cases. Prices are higher. So I thought this was interesting. Bob Black, who is the former State Bar of Texas president, such a nice guy, very good mediator, by the way. He was saying to me, the prices are just higher on settlements than they used to be. The first 6 months of the pandemic, it wasn't like that, but now we're seeing something different. Another mediator in Southeast Texas said, we're seeing, originally when I interviewed him, he said, we're seeing really crazy verdicts for plaintiffs. But then he called me back. He's like, wait, a defendant verdict came out that I think that they had made an offer of I don't know, maybe 6 figures, and the jury came back at like $17,000. So there may be a light at the end of our tunnel. And this mediator is in Beaumont, which for those of you not from Texas, that's where Footloose, the original Footloose, was filmed. It is a terrible venue for defendants. So it made me happy to hear that in his jurisdiction, that case settled for a favorable number for the defendants. Bob Black also talked about something that he coined medi-legal issues. And it's so true. So basically what's happening, I'm sure some of you have seen this, in Texas, we have something called the paid and incurred rule. And so what that means is that if you are charged $100,000 in medical bills, but your insurance adjusted down to $50,000, then the jury is only entitled to hear the $50,000 number. So what are plaintiffs' lawyers doing to avoid this, to play a game? They're just telling their clients, don't use your insurance. So there's no paid number, there's just a charged number. So what these plaintiffs' lawyers are doing, sorry for plaintiffs' lawyers in the room, they are going to these doctors that overprice the surgery. And of course, everybody in Southeast Texas needs surgery. If you have a case there, they need surgery. And it's going to cost way more than what the insurance company would actually quote. And so there is a new case that came out, again, a small light at the end of our very long tunnel, that recently said defendants have the opportunity to challenge the medical provider's negotiated rate. So for example, in this case, if you have a case that I don't know, the doctor says it's going to be $195,000, the K&L case allows the defendant now, it's a Texas Supreme Court decision, very recent, to challenge what the actual charged rate should have been. Dominoes. So I taught my 5-year-old how to play dominoes over spring break because he's very good at numbers, and it was really fun. That's not the purpose of this slide. However, one of the things that Bob Black shared with me, which I agree with, is that this domino effect, and we just heard about it, the spoliation preservation issue, has now become a weapon, at least in some of my cases, for the plaintiff to drive up the settlement cost. So for example, so the Brookshire Brothers case is the Texas Supreme Court case on spoliation. And it's actually more favorable than the California case that we just heard about involving Hillstone, which by the way, I'm going to Hillstone tonight with my husband and son. So I'm excited about the camera footage that might be there. But the Brookshire Brothers decision is actually more helpful for establishment than the California. And basically in that case, there was video that was preserved in a grocery store. Brookshire Brothers in Texas is kind of a quaint little old school grocery store. Somebody slipped and fall, and they actually preserved the video from the moment the guest entered and to the moment that they fell. And then, as most of you know, video overwrites itself, so the remainder of the footage was deleted. But the plaintiff's lawyer didn't ask for the footage until 1 year after the incident. And they had preserved, obviously, the salient part of the video. And so unlike the California Hill decision that we just heard about, Texas came back and said, first of all, it's the trial judge's decision whether a spoliation instruction should be issued, when before in Texas it was a jury decision. And as long as it's not intentional, which in this case it was not intentional, it was an overwriting of the video, then a spoliation instruction will not be issued. I can tell you that one of the things that I see a lot is cell phones and not preserving those. And Bob Black and I talked about this. That is a driving factor in cases where the plaintiffs use it to say, well, we're going to file a motion for a spoliation instruction to be issued, and that freaks out the insurance company, and so the case settlement value goes up. Jeff Abrams said out of 400 mediations during COVID, only one was in person. He wants to go to 100% Zoom. Who likes Zoom mediations? Okay, only 3 of y'all? Okay, so Ann, I know you're getting on a plane, but I will give you a Starbucks card. And who was it in the back that raised their hand? Oh, David, okay. I love everything via Zoom, I don't care. But what, so David, since we know that you have an opinion on something, why do you like Zoom mediations? I do too.
We don't have to have a joint session. It's not even a threat of a joint session. I don't like joint sessions. And I don't like the fact that at an in-person mediation, you either have an adjuster there, they're on the phone, and if they're on the phone, they're virtual anyway. So why make our clients go through the rigmarole of showing up in person when Zoom is perfectly adequate? And the good mediators already have a complete
So Ann Kaufman was also saying that she's in-house with Troon. Ann, why do you like Zoom mediations for this?
I'm the client,
Yeah.
right? It's more convenient for me. I'm based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. A lot of our mediations are in different states. We're in 47 different states. So when we have mediations, I don't necessarily want to have to travel to every single one. Sit in a room all day, right? Maybe have the mediator, and usually I'm on the defendant side, and usually the mediator maybe spends 10 minutes at a time with us. They're usually spending most of their time with the plaintiff. So to me, it's just a day, almost like a wasted day, because I try to work, and if I can do it in Zoom, I can work when the mediator is with the plaintiff for an hour and a half at a time. It's just an easier way for us to mediate, and I feel like it's just more efficient, and yeah, I prefer to do it that way.
I'll be honest. I'm sorry. Yes.
Imagine that.
What a surprise. My experience with Zoom mediation has not been great. I've always preferred live mediation. And I had a complex case down in Houston here in late December. And the adjuster was Zooming in, but the clients were local. The plaintiffs were local. And at the end of the day, the mediator's going back and forth, and he asked for me and the plaintiff's counsel to meet with him one face to face. And this was about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. And that meeting to me was the catalyst that caused the case to settle, because the plaintiff's counsel really articulated some goofy concepts about settlement allegations, and I was able to rebut them, point blank right there between me and the mediator and plaintiff's counsel. And I think that, again, was the reason the case settled, and the mediator made a recommendation to settle 2 days later. And I think if we didn't have that ability to meet face to face, I don't think the case would have settled.
And I don't disagree with you. I think honestly, if I'm being, totally honest with myself, I like the convenience of Zoom, but I also, in a mediation, I'm sure this comes as no surprise, I walk back and forth all the time. I go into the plaintiff's room provided I have permission to do so. And I agree with you that some of the cases that I've been the most successful at resolving is because I'm there talking to the lawyer, and the mediator knows that. But sometimes I don't disagree with what you're saying. But I thought it was interesting that, a mediator this is his business, is 100% of his job. I mean, he lives part-time in Mexico. And so that's why he wants to mediate via Zoom. Oh, and Taylor, since I have a couple Starbucks cards, can you give Rick and Ann ones? Because I know they can't take and also Elizabeth, because we know our alcohol regulatory lawyer is not going to take a bottle of wine on the airplane. Okay. So raise your hand if you don't know what Bachelor Nation is. Okay, so Bachelor Nation is the assimilation of all the Bachelor and Bachelorette shows. And the reason why I bring this up, and I'm sorry, let me go back one slide. The reason why I used Hollywood Squares is because this is what I explain to my clients, some of whom don't know what really Zoom is. Some of them are not the most sophisticated individuals, especially if I have like a truck driver going to a deposition with me or a mediation. I explain to them this is kind of what it's going to look like. And so that is the purpose of the Hollywood Squares slide, or I explain it kind of looks like the Brady Bunch. So Bachelor Nation, the whole purpose of that show is to get a proposal. And so we're going to talk about mediator proposals. And when I say a proposal, I mean a proposal to get married. So Bob told me I love mediator. Who likes mediator proposals? Raise your hand. Okay, see, I do too. It's interesting, only half of you raised your hand. So Bob told me that before COVID, he used proposals less than 10% of the time. And for those of you who are not from Texas, Bob Black is an excellent, very well-respected mediator. And I was shocked that he didn't use more proposals. And now he says it's 50% of his mediation practice. Jeff uses proposals. And one of the things that he said is that some people play to the proposal. And I mean, I'll just tell you, I absolutely play to the proposal. So if I know what my authority is, I'm going to mediator give me a proposal within my authority. And I think some people miss the sort of tool that can be used for. Okay. Two truths and a lie. Does anybody know this game? Well, let me say, who does not know the game Two Truths and a Lie? Really? Dr. Barth? It's because he's so truthful and ethical. So Two Truths and a Lie is really fun. It's a fun icebreaker. I used to be like a pledge trainer for the Junior League of Dallas, so I have my bucket of icebreakers if you ever need one. So Two Truths and a Lie is when you go around the room. It doesn't work in this setting because there's too many people, but I tell you 3 things, 2 of which are true and 1 of which is a lie, and you have to guess which one is the lie. So it's actually really fun. And I thought it was interesting that one of my partners said that, you know, when people were in the pandemic and it started to decline, people started to stay in hotel rooms, but then they would book them, freak out, and like make up some lie about why they couldn't come. So I thought it was interesting, her take on that. The thing that I would share with you is that in my famous sanctions case, we had, you know, this case was going on for like 5 years, and a large part of it was during the pandemic. And my clients, who were all hotel employees, were elderly. They were all vaccinated, and they were very nervous about going to a deposition in person. And by the way, my office was closed. You could not do depositions in my office. And so the plaintiff's lawyers, because they're so reasonable and fun to work with, they refused to allow us to do the depositions remotely. First case I had in 2 years where they absolutely refused. So I filed a motion with affidavits from each of my clients saying, or I shouldn't say my clients, each of the employees at the hotel, saying why they were uncomfortable, and they were all vaccinated and plaintiff's lawyers unvaccinated, why they were uncomfortable doing this. And guess what? My Dallas judge said, too bad, so sad, you got to go in person. And so my point is, the truth doesn't always prevail. I mean, we were as truthful as we could be. I was absolutely positive I was going to win that and did not. So unfortunately, not telling the truth while we should always do it doesn't always help us. So these are the 7 virtues that you can use to overcome the 7 sins. And these are legitimate. I mean, there's studies on this. And so let me kind of just go through these. So humility overcomes pride. And so what does that mean? In my opinion, let's just be modest. Let's be transparent. Let's be realistic about what the value of our case is, especially for outhouse counsel when we're talking to our clients. I mean, tell them, this is a problem. I work with people that drum up their case and they drum up their ego, and the client thinks that there's no exposure. And I just think it's silly and it's prideful. Charity. I will tell you that one of the lawyers I interviewed for this presentation said, these judges during this COVID relief bill and all these people that are allowed to stay in hotels or were allowed to stay in hotels, she said, you know, the judges feel sorry for them. They feel charitable. And so I think it's important to remember, sometimes you have to be careful, as I said to myself, do you be aggressive? Are you empathetic? Because some of our judges are being more empathetic to some of these claimants because of what has happened over the last 2 years. Chastity. This kind of goes to a little bit to Rick's presentation yesterday. This is something to overcome lust. I will share this story with you. I don't think this guy was being lustful, but I thought it was inappropriate. And he said it to me during 2021. So well after the Me Too thing happened. And let me just be clear, I'm not easily offended. I've had a lot of offensive things said to me over my career. And I have thick skin. So I share this with you, not because I think I was just kind of surprised and it was unnecessary. So I'm in this Zoom mediation. And again, I don't think that he would have said this, to your point, if it had been an in-person mediation. But we're in a Zoom mediation. I have a very conservative client from Minnesota. He's a male. My law partner is a male, and the mediator is a male, and the plaintiff is a male, and the insurance adjuster, who's also at the mediation, it was a coverage case, is a male. So I'm the only female. And I was being aggressive in a good way to serve my client. And in front of the entire mediation, the mediator says to me, it's hard for me to get upset with you because you're so pretty to look at. Y'all, this was last year. And so I settled the case, and he called me and said, I was just calling to see what you thought about the mediation. I said, I'll tell you what I thought about the mediation. First of all, you have a 44-year-old daughter. And I am also 44. Would you want somebody saying that to her? And it was like this room, it was very quiet. Well, I mean, I didn't mean to offend you. I said, I understand you didn't mean to offend me. I said, but it wasn't needed. I hope that you're telling me that you don't want to argue with me because I'm doing a good job, not because you think I'm so pretty. So I just shared that story with you because it unneeded, another reason, sadly, why I may probably not use that mediator again. Gratitude overcomes envy. And so what I mean by that is I understand there's this whole issue about these employees being jealous and creating problems for the front of the house. So I'm very grateful every day for my job. I have worked at Cozen O'Connor for 20 years because I've never worked anywhere else. I wake up every day and I'm so thankful for what I do. Now, mind you, we all know that being a lawyer is tiresome and billing hours is terrible, but be gracious. I will say that there are mediators that I sit with and the other side treats the mediator horribly, and also the other side. So I'm also telling this to myself, maybe be gracious to the other side, not aggressive, try not to drop F-bombs. And like I told you, people make deals with people that they like. This is the words of my husband. Temperance, another word for that to avoid gluttony is control. As Stephen rightly said, we are all control freaks. I'm exhibit A. But be controlled and not, and just, that's a good way to just behave in general. I think Stephen Barth might be one of the most sort of controlled, even-keeled people. When he talks, I immediately kind of calm down, and that's a very good virtue. And it's good for, you know, lawyers that are litigators to remember that. Know when to draw the line in terms of temperance. I will tell you that if any of you do not want to take wine on the airplane and you would like this book, that is one of the cowboy ethics. Know when to draw the line. Patience is hard. Expect 2 mediations. Expect a ridiculous demand. I mean, we all just know that that's what's happening. And so instead of getting upset about it, just be patient, understand. Sometimes, at least in this day and age, it may take a month to get your case settled after mediation. And finally, diligence. I would say that outhouse counsel has a duty to develop not only a rapport with the mediator, which is why I always call the mediator before mediations, and I get to know them, but also a rapport with the other side. Like I said earlier, I think it's easier to settle a case if you and the other side have some sort of relationship. So diligence overcomes our friend the sloth. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall. Thanks. We need to take just a minute while we get the folks online for their CLE credit. But Kendall, I mind what from your talk, it reminded me of this adage, people are normal until they check into a hotel.
For sure.
Right, Carrie? You know, people say, what do you mean by that? I said, what are you talking about? I said, when you go stay at a friend's house, you don't walk out with a bathrobe. You know, you don't take the shampoo and the conditioner and you don't jump up and down on the bed. Oh, you're right. Like, yeah.
The other thing I would say is an adage, unfortunately, because I represent them, I can say this. Everybody thinks they're somebody when they go to the Ritz-Carlton.
All right. Thanks again. That was